So here we go again with Herb Dean, another main event and another strange night of strange, or more just like a plain bad night in the office for Herb Dean. It's so wild to me, right? I watch these fights and I'll sometimes watch them with my casual brother who will jump in for main events. And even when we're watching the fights together, he will see Herb Dean and he just goes ahead and goes, oh, great, we've got Herb Let It Play Dean here, because he knows that no matter what, Herb is just going to keep letting this fight go. And that is from someone who does not watch the sport as closely as we do. I'm pretty sure that all started back when Sean O'Malley beat the piss out of that Joker kid, with the green hair, Chris Moutinho, right? And it felt like that went for an hour straight, didn't it? Like, that must have only been 3 rounds, but it felt that beating went on and on and on. And I'm pretty sure that's how long that joke has been going for, since McGregor was last in the ring. Enough time to film and produce a movie. Well, yesterday we had another classic copper standard from Herb Dean. Firstly, it was the ground and pound that happened in the first round. Like, I could have easily seen the fight being stopped there, but Herb decided to let it go on, and then we had to endure another 20 minutes of 2 hairy men hugging each other in their underwear. What a fun way to spend a Sunday afternoon. But then on top of that, it was the kick to a ground opponent, which, number one, just bring in One Championship's rule sets. One Championship is just better than the UFC with the scoring and the rule sets. Can we please implement that? But then picking up things from the conversations that are happening after the main event, apparently that's not even downed in Las Vegas. Like, why Las Vegas has its very specific own rule set. I think from what I'm understanding from the community here, is that downed is a full palm on the mat, not just the point of the fingers, whatever it is. And we're talking about this kicking to a ground opponent more and more and more. Can we just scrap it already? But anyway, the kick happens and Herb stops the fight and puts Nassourdine Imavov in one corner and a neutral corner and pauses the fight. And Chris Curtis from Roman Dolidze's corner starts harassing Nassourdine Imavov and riling him up. And now Herb's response of all this is to tell Nassourdine that he will disqualify him if Nassourdine doesn't calm down. Not to go over to the corner that is causing the trouble from the fighter, not to go over to Roman Dolidze's corner and punish them, the people that are actually doing the wrongdoing, to say that if you don't calm down, I'm going to disqualify your fighter. He goes and punishes someone who is just being harassed in the corner. But then he goes ahead and takes a point off Nassourdine Imavov with no warning, when we have seen plenty of referees not take a point for even worse infringements from kneeing a downed opponent. And this was just a sort of glancing face kick that happened. And Herb goes ahead and takes a point straight away for that, probably just to punish Nassourdine for being pissed off at Chris Curtis. And it's Chris Curtis, the one in the other fighter's corner, that is causing all the trouble. Now, if this was new for Herb, we wouldn't be making such a big deal out of this. But like I said at the start of this video, even casuals now know that Herb Dean's reffing is just going to be given a lot of leeway. There's going to be a lot of little weird mistakes, like what I just said then, but a little trip-ups, right? But he was brilliant back in 2010 all the way up to 2016. Back in the day, Herb Dean was brilliant. And that's probably where Joe Rogan got into the habit of calling him the gold standard. But ever since then, he has just slipped and slipped and slipped. And these days, he is so sloppy. There are entire YouTube compilations of just Herb Dean making mistakes in the octagon. I mean, UFC 266, Alexander Volkanovski, Brian Ortega. Between the rounds, Brian Ortega is clearly out of it. Herb asks him like 4 questions and he ignores them, gives 3 wrong answers, doesn't know what is going on. Finally, on the 4th answer, he gets it half right, and Herb says, yeah, he's fine to go on. He's fine to go on. I mean, Brian Ortega was having the living piss beaten out of him, and Herb decides it's good enough to go. Maybe it's up to the corner to stop that fight, and it's up to Herb to let it keep playing. I don't know, but weird reffing decision. UFC 264, Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 3. Conor was cheating constantly, pulling the inside of Dustin's gloves and just trying to launch up kicks. And Poirier complained about it plenty. Herb didn't do anything about it. Then there's UFC 299, Conor McGregor versus Khabib. And Conor was cheating so much during that event, just constantly cheating, grabbing Khabib's gloves, hooking his toes on the cage, pulling down Khabib's shorts. Like, if there was any sort of cheating going on, if there was any cheating that you could do inside the cage, Conor was doing it. Maybe there should be a list of all the times Conor McGregor cheated. Either way, Herb was just allowing that to play on no matter what. UFC 257, Marina Rodriguez had to KO Amanda Ribas twice to get the fight to stop. She literally knocked her down flat on her ass, walked off, and Herb was like, keep going. She's still breathing, mate. I can see her chest moving. And that's not the first time that's happened. Do you remember Masvidal versus Cowboy Cerrone, where Cowboy is knocked out at the end of the first round with a couple of seconds left? Herb Dean jumps in to stop Masvidal and the timer goes off and he's like, oh yeah, Cowboy can get back in there. He got up. He's all right. I mean, what the hell is Herb thinking half the time? One day, man, people are going to be looking at a tragedy in the cage from Herb Dean's reffing and they're going to be going, how did this happen? How did this happen? He was the gold standard. No one warned us that this would happen. You know, Herb Dean's reffing actually makes it kind of better when you think about it. I know this entire video so far has been just crapping on Herb, but if you're a fan of violence and you're in there to see people get the hell beaten out of each other, and who isn't a fan of violence, that's why we're here watching this, Herb Dean is actually the best thing that could happen to the sport because it's almost the closest thing you could have to a real gladiator to the death matchup. It's almost like there is no referee in there at all, and you can just watch people go absolutely at it. And it's only at that pure last moment of a heartbeat that the fight does get stopped, which is kind of great. It's very CTE society. But in all honesty, what do you do to fix bad reffing? I don't think flat out firing bad referees is the right thing to do. I think that is probably a step too far. But there are so many regional scenes and so many feeder organizations into the UFC that have different referees. I don't see why you can't put Herb Dean onto just LFA, Cage Warriors, and suspend him from the UFC, from the major organizations for 6 months and bring up another referee for that 6-month period that hasn't had quite as much time as the Herb Deans, the Mark Goddards. Essentially what you want to do is just raise everybody's bar up a little bit and put Herb Dean on the bottom of the pack, or any referee that screws up, just for 6 months. And that way you get a good rotation of referees having high profile decision-making fights. And if they screw up, they can go back down to low profile fights where the decision-making isn't quite as so many eyes on it like there is on a fight night main event ESPN audience. They're allowed to make mistakes and get their head back in the game. You're giving new up-and-coming referees a chance to prove themselves on bigger and bigger events where the stakes are a little bit higher, and you can keep that fair rotation going. I think a 6-month suspension or just roll through is the right way to do it, rather than having the same referees constantly on the same main events with so many eyes on them, where the pressure must really start to get to them. If it's an early stoppage, the internet turns on them. If it's a late stoppage, the internet turns on them. If they make one wrong decision, the internet turns on them. If they don't know the rule set for every single region that they're in, I've seen Herb Dean do refereeing over at one in Singapore. Like, they're in all sorts of different regions with all sorts of different rule sets, and maybe not doing so many main events gives the mind a chance to relax and to tighten up the skills on the back end, rather than being on the front end every single weekend across the 3 major organizations. But they're just my thoughts on this weekend's very odd refereeing decisions. Who do you think is the worst referee in the UFC? Let me know that down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button down there. And of course, I'll see you all in the next one.